Obviously, he's a Boise State legend, a guy that played there, understood the culture, helped win a lot of big games at Boise State, and I think is a good coach. I do. I do think that. Today, that sounds ludicrous. Today is the nadir of his popularity and credibility, but I do think he's a good head coach. From my observations and my conversations with him, we went out to Boise. We had him on the show in person, in front of a bunch of fans, etc. My vibe was always very regimented, very by the book, had his very specific vision of how things go, how you run a program, and he was not going to be warm and cuddly about it. And if you kind of allowed him to just be the football guy, that was going to be fine. And that was fine. And with Boise State, he probably could have been there for 20 years. He probably could have been there for 30 years and been just a Boise State legend if he wanted to. That guy, that town, that program, and go to big bowl games, compete for the Mountain West every single year, maybe with conference realignment, get into a bigger conference, and that could have worked there because you're allowed at Boise State to just be football, and if you win enough, you're not going to get much interference. That's the beauty of performing well at that level, at that school, if you have a natural fit. People trusted you. You had instant credibility because of your history. You were not an outsider. Once you leave to go to a massive program where expectations are through the roof, a lot of that changes. Now, if you're Urban Meyer, if you're Jim Harbaugh, if you're Nick Saban, you can gain a lot of that influence and power at one of those large institutions because you have the big credibility. But if you're coming from a group of five school and then you go to a Power Five school that has kind of this thirst for winning, which Auburn does, then you don't really get to call all the shots. You're not really the king. You have to play patty cake. And Brian Harsin doesn't do that. There is a political game to play in college football. You know, in the NFL, an owner or a general manager hires you as the head coach, and you're entrusted with football, and you answer to two people, the GM and the owner. That's it. You don't have to worry about the longest serving season ticket holder. You don't have to worry about who owns the biggest suite in the stadium. You don't have to worry about anybody else sticking their paws into your job. If Cliff Kingsbury is liked by his GM and or his owner, he can be a terrible head coach, which he is, and get a contract extension. He doesn't have to worry if, you know, the owner of the local Meineke car care company that has a suite or has their headquarters in Phoenix or something doesn't like him. And Brian Harsin doesn't play that game. So number one, you have other hands in your cookie jar. Number two, at Auburn, it's harder than a lot of other places as well. There is the reality of chasing Alabama in your own state, so you don't get a breather. You don't get some runway to build it up. Every day you're reminded that you're not Alabama when you're at Auburn. And that doesn't sit well with fans, with boosters, with donors, with power brokers, with the people that are involved. So it's hard at Auburn because of Alabama. But number 2 at Auburn, it's really hard because they traditionally have more interference from donors, from power brokers into the sports, specifically the football, than anywhere else. So Harsin, you just can't fit Harsin into that. Now, this offseason, if Brian Harsin wants another job, I think he could get another job and do well at that job. Arizona State's open. They fired Herm Edwards. Colorado's open. They fired Carl Durrell. West Coast, Pac-12, Mountain West region where he's recruited before. Low expectations, low interference. You don't have massive donors going, why aren't we USC? You just got to get them to 7-5, and they'll back off. And if you get to an 8-4, pop the champagne, and 9-3, and maybe you play a game or two in November that could be for a Pac-12 championship game berth. Oh, hell yeah. We'll take that. That's amazing. Those places for Brian Harsin would be a better fit. Auburn's not. Auburn was a bad fit. So it's just an experiment that it imploded. I think the biggest question here is whether the Harsin reign is seen by other good candidates as a warning sign. Harsin wasn't a good fit there, doesn't glad hand, doesn't love to speak at the coaching circuits and the rubber chicken circuit and talk to this Lions club, and he doesn't want to do that. But also, what they did, or somebody did, was drag his personal life into the internet and the public spotlight last offseason, which forced an investigation into what was going on. Now, was that football related? Absolutely not. Not seemingly. He's had a ton of turnover with his coaching staff. That was a red flag. But then personal life stuff of if he was dating somebody, who was his secretary, who did he hire, blah, blah, blah. All that got dredged up. And that's because he upset somebody. Now, was it because he wasn't a glad hander, he wasn't a political guy? Or was it because he wasn't winning? Or was it both? Who knows? But the fact is, if you're a good candidate and you have options, do you want the Auburn job because of something like that? Take Lane Kiffin, for example. Take Deion Sanders, for example. Those two guys have options. Those two guys will get Power 5 opportunities every single coaching cycle if they want them. Lane has proven to win in college. Lane knows the SEC. I'm sure everybody at Auburn would be probably thrilled to have Lane Kiffin sign on the dotted line. Deion, more of an unproven commodity, but damn, the guy can sell. He knows how to sell a program, doesn't he? He knows the South. He knows big-time college football. He's a celebrity. But do either of those guys say yes to Auburn if they have seen Brian Harsin's private life get dragged through the mud after 1 year? Do they go, hey, you know what? I got some good options, and I'm not walking into that lines. And that's always been, to me, the great problem at Auburn, is that Gus Malzahn wins 75% of his games there. But it felt like half of his energy went to placating or surviving the onslaught of criticism. We can do better. We should be winning more. Why is Bama winning the national championship games? Why can't we be Bama? Blah, blah, blah. And I don't know if after Harsin gets a year and a half, whether other candidates will go, hey, you know what? I can fix that. I can survive that. I'll be fine. Or if they go, I don't need that. Let me go someplace where I'm a hero for at least a couple of years. You know, if I go 3-9, all right. But Harsin never even did that. Last year, the first month of the season was great, and then the second half of the season was not. And then this year, up and down, more down, and then you lose this past weekend and suddenly they fire you. I'm not saying it would have worked at Auburn with Harsin because, as I said before, he was a bad cultural fit there. But what I am saying is if you just watch that happen, would you walk into that dojo?